Most people are terrified of being alone. They believe isolation means failure, rejection, or social defeat. But what if solitude is not a weakness, but the hidden advantage that separates ordinary lives from extraordinary ones? High above the noise of the world, an eagle spreads its wings alone across the mountain peaks. Meanwhile, millions gather below, packed tightly together, moving in the same direction, waiting for instructions they never question. If you have ever felt alone in this life, then perhaps you are not broken. Perhaps you are holding something rare, something the majority secretly desires, but is too afraid to claim. Because in a hyper-connected world, solitude has been misunderstood. Being alone is often labeled as failure, as rejection, as something to fix. From a young age, we are conditioned to believe that success means constant social presence. More contacts, more invitations, more conversations that never truly matter. But look carefully at how real power is built. The individuals who shape industries, who create breakthroughs, who design the future. Are they spending their nights chasing approval in crowded rooms? Or are they quietly working in spaces where distractions cannot follow? The uncomfortable truth is this: the crowd is rarely a place of growth. More often, it is a place of comfort, a place where people gather not to evolve, but to avoid confronting the emptiness within themselves. Silence can be terrifying, because in silence, you finally meet who you truly are. This video is not about loneliness. It is about redefining solitude. There is a difference between emotional emptiness and strategic isolation, between being abandoned and deliberately stepping away to build strength. History shows us a pattern. Empires are not built during celebrations. They are built during long, invisible nights when no one is watching. Modern society offers a seductive illusion, the belief that belonging to the group automatically leads to security and progress. But from an economic perspective, following the crowd often means trading your most valuable asset, time, for temporary emotional rewards. Hours spent in meaningless conversations, energy drained by constant comparison, money burned on appearances that add no real value. People call this networking. But in many cases, it is simply consumption. Relationships that produce no growth are not assets. They are liabilities. They quietly reduce your focus, your creativity, and your ability to build something meaningful. And when real crises arrive, financial collapse, personal setbacks, moments of uncertainty, the same crowd that once surrounded you can disappear overnight. This is when a deeper realization emerges. The number of contacts in your phone does not determine the balance in your bank account. And social approval cannot be liquidated when life demands resilience. Why does the crowd often struggle financially? Because markets follow a simple rule. What is abundant becomes cheap. When you choose to blend into the majority, you unconsciously position yourself as easily replaceable. True influence comes from scarcity, from differentiation, from becoming someone whose presence cannot be replicated. Leaders do not wait for trends, they create them. While the crowd seeks validation, strategic individuals build leverage. If you constantly think like the majority and act like the majority, then statistically, you will receive the same outcomes as the majority. There is also another hidden trap, the fear of missing out. Many people feel anxious spending a weekend alone. They scroll through images of others, celebrating, believing that absence equals loss. But often, this fear reveals something deeper, a dependency on external stimulation. When you cannot generate your own sense of purpose, you begin to import emotional meaning from the outside world. Strong individuals, however, understand a different principle. Sometimes, Your absence is more powerful than your presence, because choosing where not to go is just as important as choosing where to invest your energy. The true quality of a person is revealed by what they do when no one is watching, not by the applause of spectators. There is a timeless idea that your life reflects the average of the people you spend the most time with. Surround yourself with complacency, and your ambition will slowly dissolve. Surround yourself with negativity, and your vision will shrink. Crowds possess gravity. They pull everything toward the center, toward safety, toward familiarity, toward mediocrity. And when you attempt to rise above that level, the same voices that once laughed with you may become the first to resist your growth, because your evolution reminds them of their own inaction. But if solitude can be powerful, why do so many people still resist it? Because stepping away from the crowd feels like a loss. It feels like giving up safety, familiarity, and emotional comfort. Yet, in the language of investment, this is simply the moment of cutting bad positions. Every serious investor understands that growth begins with discipline. Sometimes the hardest decision is to stop allocating your time to environments that slowly drain your potential. To multiply your value, to become someone whose influence compounds over time, you must first walk away from what is comfortable but unproductive. The loneliness you are trying to escape may actually be the entry price of freedom. Look at the highest peaks on Earth. They are not crowded. There are no long lines of people competing for space at the summit. Only wind, silence, and the rare presence of those willing to climb beyond convenience. The crowd exists at the base, where the ground is flat, predictable, and crowded. Choosing a path of leadership or mastery inevitably means accepting periods of isolation. It means learning to sit with your own thoughts, to confront your internal conflicts without distraction, to heal setbacks without constant reassurance. For many, social noise becomes a temporary anesthetic, a way to avoid facing deeper questions about purpose and direction. People gather not only to connect, but sometimes to collectively pretend that stagnation is acceptable. Comfort can become a trap. It quietly erodes ambition, reduces creativity, and turns individuals into replaceable components inside systems they never fully understand. So pause for a moment. If your life were a portfolio, how much of your time would be invested in low-return activities? How much emotional capital is being spent on maintaining appearances instead of building capability? We are often told that success comes from belonging. But wealth, whether financial, intellectual, or personal, has always followed a different principle: unequal distribution. Resources tend to flow from the unfocused majority toward the disciplined minority. If you truly want to change your trajectory, you must be willing to step out of alignment with the average. You must tolerate the temporary coldness of walking a path that few understand. Solitude is not a punishment. It is a strategic environment, a space where thinking sharpens, skills compound, and internal strength quietly accumulates. Stop trying to gain approval from everyone. Stop selling your most valuable hours to relationships that produce no meaningful growth. Sometimes, progress begins the moment you close the door and begin rebuilding your life from the inside. Because when your capability becomes undeniable, the same people who once overlooked you may later seek proximity to your momentum. This is not cruelty. It is simply how attention behaves. But before you can use solitude as an advantage, there is a critical distinction you must understand. There is a difference between loneliness and chosen isolation. They may appear similar on the surface, but they function in completely opposite ways. Loneliness is often a state of emotional deficit. You are physically alone, yet mentally searching for validation elsewhere. You feel incomplete, restless, dependent on external signals to feel worthy. In economic terms, this resembles borrowing emotional capital at extremely high interest rates. You are unable to generate fulfillment internally, so you attempt to import it from the outside world. This dependency reduces your perceived value. It signals instability, like a company struggling to survive. And instability naturally repels long-term opportunities. Loneliness consumes time, drains confidence, and increases the likelihood of poor decisions, especially those made out of desperation. In contrast, deliberate isolation operates differently. It is a surplus state. You step back not because you are rejected, but because you require uninterrupted space to restructure your priorities. You are alone, but not lacking. Instead, you feel complete, focused, self-directed. At this stage, you are no longer seeking approval. You are building capacity. Solitude becomes an intangible asset, one that preserves energy, protects clarity, and enables long-term strategic thinking. In quiet environments, you are less influenced by trends, less reactive to criticism, and more capable of making independent decisions. The core difference between loneliness and chosen isolation is not the environment. It is the position of control. Loneliness is passive. Isolation is intentional. One waits to be rescued. The other decides when to open the door. Imagine two individuals sitting alone in the same cafe. One constantly refreshes notifications, hoping for attention that never satisfies. The other reads, reflects, plans, completely at ease with silence. Externally, both are alone. Internally, they live in different worlds. People may not consciously analyze these signals, but they instinctively sense them. They move away from desperation. They respect composure. Ultimately, how you are perceived and how you perceive yourself depends on whether solitude is your burden or your chosen investment. But solitude alone does not guarantee transformation. The real question is, what do you actually do with the silence? For those who understand its potential, isolation becomes a training ground, a controlled environment where resilience, clarity, and long-term thinking are forged over time. When you step away from constant stimulation and accept the discomfort of walking alone, you are making a classic value investment. You are sacrificing short-term emotional rewards for exponential personal returns. Fewer distractions today can translate into stronger competence tomorrow. History repeatedly shows that individuals who reshape industries or cultures rarely spend their days chasing superficial engagement. They invest deeply in focused creation. They spend long hours in rooms where recognition is absent, but meaningful work is possible. Excellence often requires a price. To occupy positions few can reach, you must tolerate experiences few are willing to endure. Instead of viewing solitude as abandonment, you can reframe it as agency. A shift from passive loneliness to deliberate isolation. Rather than waiting for invitations, you begin scheduling commitments with growth itself, with learning, skill development, and ambitious objectives. Time spent alone becomes premium time, an opportunity to upgrade your mental operating system, repair internal limitations, and refine your direction. Do not exchange this opportunity for low-quality interactions that offer only temporary reassurance. Handled correctly, solitude becomes leverage. Once you are comfortable with your own company, external uncertainty loses much of its power. Job loss becomes a period of retraining. Relationship endings become space for self-realignment. social rejection becomes clarity about who truly matters. Isolation can transform you into a psychological stronghold, a structure capable of withstanding volatility, because inner stability reduces the impact of external turbulence. At its core, loneliness reflects scarcity. Chosen isolation reflects abundance. One feels deprived, the other prepares strategically, and the decision between them is often a matter of perspective. There comes a stage in personal development that feels both brutal and transformative, a period where you transition from reacting to circumstances to consciously designing your trajectory. This requires activating what we might call a deep focus mode. Not withdrawal from reality, but a temporary restructuring of priorities. Imagine a large organization facing declining performance. It does not celebrate prematurely. It does not increase noise. Instead, it pauses expansion, cuts unnecessary expenses, and channels resources into research and development. Externally, this phase may appear quiet, even stagnant. Internally, however, intense recalibration is underway. Your life operates in a similar way. Periods of reduced social visibility can signal preparation rather than failure, a deliberate decision to upgrade before re-engaging with complexity. One of the first principles of this phase is protecting attention. In the modern attention economy, focus is constantly fragmented by notifications, entertainment loops, and endless opportunities for distraction. Every interruption is a small extraction of cognitive capital. To cultivate meaningful progress, you must sometimes create boundaries. Limit unnecessary inputs. Reduce environments that dilute intention. Accept the possibility of being misunderstood in exchange for long-term alignment. This is not isolation for its own sake. It is strategic allocation. During this quieter chapter, your primary task becomes personal research and development. Identify high-value skills that markets consistently reward. Engage with knowledge not merely for stimulation, but for capability. Train your body not only for aesthetics, but for discipline and endurance. Study not simply to collect credentials, but to build practical leverage. These efforts often feel repetitive, uncelebrated, invisible, yet repetition is where compounding begins. Every focused hour becomes stored capacity. Every small improvement accumulates into disproportionate future outcomes. While many remain comfortable in short-term gratification, you are effectively conducting insider preparation for your own potential. However, deep focus phases are not purely productive. They are also reflective. In silence, unresolved fears tend to surface. Past insecurities, doubts about competence, and internal conflicts may become more visible. Many escape this confrontation by returning immediately to noise. But genuine growth requires engagement with these internal challenges. It involves questioning habitual patterns, examining emotional reactions, understanding the roots of hesitation. This process can be uncomfortable. Yet without it, unexamined limitations continue to influence decisions. Gradually, as awareness increases, you begin developing a form of mental independence. External validation becomes less necessary. Temporary setbacks become easier to interpret. From the outside, this phase may look unremarkable. Others might assume stagnation. But long-term builders recognize a different reality. Foundations are being reinforced. Future capacity is expanding. Every enduring enterprise, every influential creator has experienced periods of relative invisibility before reaching broader recognition. Silence often precedes impact, and when preparation eventually meets opportunity, the transformation can appear sudden, even though it was years in the making. At that point, relationships shift. Instead of chasing approval, you become someone whose competence attracts attention. Not through luck, but through the accumulated value of disciplined solitude. But there is one final misconception that continues to trap millions of people. The belief that relationships alone can generate value, that success comes from constant networking, from endless social presence, from shaking hands with as many people as possible. In reality, connection without capability rarely creates meaningful outcomes. If your internal value remains undeveloped, multiplying your contacts does not multiply your results. It simply amplifies emptiness. Markets do not reward visibility alone. They reward substance. Influential individuals, those who control resources, opportunities, and capital, possess a refined instinct for value exchange. They collaborate with those who bring something tangible to the table: expertise, discipline, innovation, or strategic thinking. Not merely enthusiasm. Attempting to build connections without developing competence is similar to promoting a product that has not yet been designed. Eventually, the market responds with indifference, or worse, quiet dismissal. This is where solitude reveals its economic advantage. Instead of investing energy in presenting an unfinished version of yourself, you temporarily withdraw the product from circulation. You return to the workshop. You refine. You upgrade. You rebuild. When genuine capability is established, relationships begin to form organically. Not through pursuit, but through recognition. Scarcity plays a crucial role in this dynamic. Anything that is constantly available gradually loses perceived value. Individuals who attend every gathering, accept every invitation, and attempt to please every audience often dilute their own presence. Overexposure creates familiarity. Familiarity reduces curiosity. In contrast, those who selectively manage their availability create an atmosphere of significance. Their absence generates interest. Their participation carries weight. Time becomes a premium asset. People begin scheduling around them. Opportunities become competitive. This shift is not accidental. It is the result of disciplined positioning. Strategic solitude allows you to transition from being a commodity to becoming a differentiated asset. In the digital era, this principle has intensified. Previously, individuals had to actively pursue attention. Today, attention can be attracted through demonstrated expertise and consistent value creation. When you invest your solitary hours into mastering a meaningful domain, you gradually transform into a signal within the noise. Employers notice, investors observe, collaborators initiate contact. Not because you demanded visibility, but because your output became impossible to ignore. This is an inversion of effort. Instead of chasing opportunities, you cultivate conditions where opportunities begin to seek you. At a deeper level, solitude also functions as a powerful filter. By stepping away from constant social interaction, you allow superficial connections to dissolve naturally. What remains are individuals aligned with your direction, those who recognize and respect your evolving standards. These relationships are different. They are built on shared ambition, mutual contribution, and long-term trust. They are not transactional encounters driven by momentary convenience. In economic language, they resemble strategic partnerships rather than casual exchanges. This filtration process dramatically reduces hidden costs. Less emotional volatility, less wasted time, less exposure to negative influence. Your resources, attention, energy, and capital become concentrated toward meaningful objectives. Solitude does not make you poor in relationships. It makes you selective. It transforms quantity into quality. Over time, This selectivity becomes a structural advantage. While many remain trapped in cycles of distraction and validation seeking, you are quietly constructing a foundation based on competence. An empire built on real capability is far more resilient than one assembled through superficial alignment. Ultimately, solitude becomes a form of intelligent allocation, a mechanism that removes low-value noise and preserves high-value signal. It is not an escape from society. It is preparation to re-enter it with undeniable leverage. But even after understanding all of this, one challenge remains. How do you walk alone without losing your humanity? Solitude is not about becoming cold. It is not about rejecting connection. It is about refusing to dilute your potential. Many people fear being labeled different, unusual, distant. Yet the real danger is not standing apart. The real danger is dissolving into a life so predictable that it leaves no trace. When you learn to invest in solitude, your time begins to transform. Hours once consumed by distraction become periods of focused creation. Ideas take shape. Skills become sharper. Direction becomes clearer. And gradually, what once felt like emptiness reveals itself as hidden capacity. There may come a day when you stand in a position of recognition, financially secure, intellectually respected, internally composed. At that moment, you may realize that solitude was never a loss. It was the most profitable investment you ever made. Not because it brought status alone, but because it granted independence. The eagle does not fly alone out of sadness. It flies alone because very few can sustain the altitude it inhabits. Choosing a solitary path requires courage. It demands responsibility. When you stop blending into collective decisions, you can no longer blame the crowd for your outcomes. You become both strategist and executor of your own life. There are no guarantees, no safety nets. But within this pressure, a different form of strength begins to form. You develop trust in your own judgment. You become less reactive to external noise. You begin shaping your trajectory intentionally. Of course, resistance will appear. Some people will misunderstand your distance. Others may interpret growth as arrogance. This is not unusual. Human systems often resist deviation. Just as crabs instinctively pull down any member attempting to climb out of the container, social environments sometimes discourage transformation. But criticism is not always a signal to stop. Sometimes it is evidence that you are moving beyond familiar limitations. Walking alone does not mean living alone forever. It is a transitional phase, a period of elevation that allows you to meet individuals operating at different levels of awareness and ambition. As your capability increases, your environment changes. New collaborations form. New alliances emerge. Relationships become less about entertainment and more about mutual expansion. Shared vision replaces superficial interaction. The solitude of earlier stages becomes the foundation for more meaningful connections later. In this sense, isolation is not separation from life. It is preparation for a different participation in it. Ultimately, solitude is not punishment. It is a privilege, an opportunity to design a life that is intentional rather than accidental. When you stop fearing silence, you begin hearing your own direction. And when preparation finally meets opportunity, your impact may appear sudden to others. But you will know the truth. It was built quietly over time.